Okay, thank you so much, guys, and everybody from around the world to join to us. Quick introduction from my side. I'm Szabolcs Kun, Partner Technology Strategist Intern at Microsoft Hungary. And we are here with you with Mark Szabó. Mark, quick introduction from your side.
Hi guys, I'm working with Szabolcs as a partner technology strategist from the Hungarian sub, but it's not at all important. We are here to hear about Holly's career and what she is about to tell us. So let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Just to let you know, we will have the panel discussion with Holly later on. And I think let's play the most important video and then dig into your presentation, Holly.
What's going on, guys? We're having a good time.
The culture has changed so much. Everybody can grow and learn and develop.
When we make products for the world, we have to have perspective of the world.
We get a lot of benefit by having a lot of diverse ideas in the room. We all bring something different to the table, and that's our strength.
Basically, you end up having a team of highly collaborative friends that work together.
That's why you have a tribe, that's why you have a community. And that's just how we make the world a better place.
It's beautiful, it's beautiful.
That's why Microsoft.
Brilliant, all right. So hi, I am Holly. I am a software engineer on the Microsoft, or like the Cortana on Windows team. So I'm based in London at the moment. And basically I'm just here to talk to you guys today sort of about my career journey in technology, how I got started, and really about like how I can help you to get into Microsoft, like some good interview tips and some good early in career tips, so you can sort of hit the ground running on your career. So just like starting off, like this is me as a little baby. As you see, I've always been a little bit techie, and like playing games from like a really young age sort of sparked my interest in technology, and really started making me like kind of imagine the possibilities of what technology could really do. So like throughout high school and throughout like my like lower education, I sort of took different programming camps and computer science classes, and like to really sort of that helped like me get started into my interest in technology and start like learning my first languages. And so my first languages were Java and C++. So I dove straight into some of the languages that are helped in games development. And so after that, I then needed to start going off to university. So I knew I always wanted to go to university, but was a little bit torn as to where I should study. And so I was accepted into a couple good universities in the USA, but was thinking that like the UK really offered me something that I couldn't replace, which was the integrated year-long placement year. And that sort of happens between your second and third year of university. And so the University of Surrey, that's sort of a bit outside of London, has like one of the best placement schemes in the UK. And I really do have them to thank for preparing me to work at Microsoft. And so at least for me, like while I was like pretty well suited to the university teaching style, not everyone does learn best in sort of a lecture and exam based environment. And so apprenticeships like the ones that Microsoft runs and Microsoft partners with to run are really good options for people who learn best by doing, by like best on the job. Like recently I've been on a panel where one of the current apprentices like had turned down Ivy League universities. So these are like your Yales, your Harvards, your MITs, like some of those, to be an apprentice at Microsoft and loves it. But really, like regardless of if you kind of go down the university track, with like a placement or the apprenticeship track, then it's really about like getting that early career experience and making those industry connections, becoming more employable, and also the added benefit of earning a bit more cash. And so as part of my work between like balancing my coursework and balancing my social life, some of the other work I sort of did was with my university's computing society as its vice president. And so it was really important for me to be able to use that platform to sort of help support increasing gender diversity in the technology industry, introduce other women that were sort of traditionally outside of the industry to the industry, and then help support those within like the women in the industry, like if they ever kind of like face any kind of discrimination or on their really like steeper uphill journey than some of our like male counterparts in the industry. And so like my mentor, so you can see her at the end of this table at the far end, kind of helped me at least deal with like sort of some of my imposter syndrome and help boost my confidence and my skills. I think having like a mentor is particularly valuable, especially during in your early in career stages. And so then finally, 4 years later, I graduated. It was probably the hardest 4 years of my life, but it was really worth kind of every second because it did really lead me to like my job at Microsoft, and which is just like my absolute dream job. And so I've always wanted to work at Microsoft. I really am a big fangirl. When my second year started and the placement hunt really started to begin, it was one of the first places that I applied to, and it was it took a long time to get through the process. But before I really started doing any of that, I used my university's career service to kind of have them review my CV and like attended different workshops about kind of how to like be successful in each of the different types of interviews, like your phone interviews, your video interviews, your assessment centers, all of things kind of like that. And so during this process, during this like 5-6 months that it took me to complete the Microsoft interview, like different stages, I did have other offers from some companies, but ended up turning them down so I could essentially like hold out for that one Microsoft job. It took like 4 or 5 rounds, but eventually I did land my first job as a software engineer on Paint. And so it's really like, this is where I first started, was like working on Paint for a year. And so I was like implementing features like 3D printing from Paint, adding like different stickers and filters to the scene. I worked on the feature for exporting to FBX, which is the 3D file format used in like Unity, which is for like games development. I also helped do things like non-uniformly scaling 3D objects, things kind of in that nature. One of the things I'm quite proud of is I also was able to create the demo announcement of the product that was held in New York City. So this is where this image is from now, is from Paint 3D's like international announcement of the product, as well as then I was also able to create the like America's NFL Super Bowl 51 demo that was shown on site in the USA, which was also pretty cool. So for Paint, I developed in C++, C++, CX, and XAML. After that, I moved back to Seattle for the summer so I could work on Xbox's off-console experiences. It was a pretty like killer summer of just like great networking in the HQ, which is like, so this photo is me with Phil Spencer, so the EVP of gaming at Microsoft, as well as it was also just filled with loads of learning about different kind of technologies and languages and sort of how that fits into the overall Xbox ecosystem. And so with working on the Xbox team, this is really when I first started using C#. And then post-university, I rejoined the London team I worked on with Paint, but by this time we had switched over to working on Cortana for Windows. And so for Cortana, I also use C# and XAML. Unfortunately, this is like a tentative project, so I can't really speak much more about it, but I can say that I'm pretty excited about this project and sort of maybe some of the outcomes that are going to come in the coming months and years. And so it's really this kinds of like different experiences across like 3 very different global products that kind of taught me what inspires me. So it's like things like pursuing innovation, pushing boundaries into new human-computer interaction spaces, and like sort of the ability to kind of enhance the lives of others around the world. And so these are the things that kind of motivate me and are used as sort of like pieces of information I use to kind of guide my career forward. And so those are the 3 products I worked on, but really now it's like kind of like, how can you nail your interview at Microsoft and how can you get your foot in the door like I did? And so it kind of like breaks down into a couple different sections. And so if you come into an interview, you're going to have probably about like maybe 4 different interviews, and sometimes they're with different people. And so one of the topics you're going to probably cover is software engineering principles. So these things are going to be CV-based questions, there'll be small to medium-sized questions, and kind of non-technical questions. And so to be successful in these, you're going to really want to know your CV inside and out. Like, you don't really want to be caught out on something that you've highlighted in your CV and then don't know. So if it means kind of refining your CV by taking things out, it really could be worth it so you make that good impression. If you do want to do practice questions before to prep for your technical interviews, then I would really look for ones that are about the small to medium sized. These could involve writing on a whiteboard, or it could just be verbal questions, but in all likelihood, they will not be one-word answers. So make sure to kind of explain your thinking. So like, also, when it comes to non-technical questions, we have to remember that software engineering is not just about writing code. It's sort of about the entire software engineering process. So you should consider things like documentation and testing and like sort of how well you consider edge cases. So when you're trying to prep for these interviews, think about what kinds of questions could they ask you in these spaces? How can you prepare for them and focus on these kinds of topic areas? So for me, one of my interviews was like a series of questions, and I basically kind of had to see how many questions I could get through in the interview period. So they were like sort of smallish questions, but they really did test your fundamental understanding of the language and of programming. After that, you kind of lead on to problem solving and algorithms questions. So these will be the common algorithms that you kind of learn at universities, things like sorting and searching and reversing. Like if you've learned it in class, you should probably know it, as well as the like other sort of medium to large size questions or challenges. And this is really where the challenge of the technical interview is. And so if you've done well in your first round of fundamentals, you may be given a harder question to sort of see if you're up to the task in one of these problem solving and algorithm sections. So these questions will require things like algorithm, data structure, and sort of complexity and optimization knowledge. While you're answering these questions, you should really try to explain your thought process like the entire time, ask clarifying questions. And if you get stuck, then like in all likelihood, the person like conducting the interview will probably give you hints to kind of help you along, get to the answer. These people are there to kind of see you be successful. So really listen to these hits and see what kind of message that they're really trying to pass along to you. And with that, alongside comes like team fit. So this might be done by one of the more of like the managers on the team, maybe someone less technical, but this will really kind of evaluate how well you would fit into the team dynamic. You obviously spend more time with your colleagues than the people you live at home sometimes. So the team fit is really kind of crucial for both the company and for you. So like I didn't know this at the time of my interview, but my team were looking for more sort of like outgoing, communicative people. And so luckily I fit the bill, but really at the end of the day, you kind of just have to be yourself because each team is going to be different. The other things that I might cover are sort of behavioral and competency questions. So things like, what would you do in X situation? Or what was the most challenging project you worked on and why? A lot of these questions will come up for most interviews. So trying to figure out a good response to like these sort of sample questions beforehand, so you're kind of like clear and hit like all the right notes in the moment could be pretty helpful. So like I have started like creating a document where I basically wrote answers to all the common topics that came up for these kinds of questions. So these are things like adaptability, teamwork, effective communication, self-motivation and drive, initiative, creative problem solving, and kind of like client focus. So if you like have an idea of for each of those subjects, like a good use case that you can kind of explain and demonstrate your skills in these areas, like that is going to make you come across well. So last sort of like big section that you might have is something about group assessments. And so usually if you're going in for an assessment center, they'll do a group assessment for like all of those people that have showed up for the interview on that day. So it'll usually be like one big problem where you're given a challenge and it's really evaluating about your team working skills. So while you're working through these problems, you should make sure that you're explaining your thinking and your motivations for the solution. You should avoid railroading the conversation if you have lots of ideas. And make sure to kind of include the quieter members of your team into the group conversation. These kinds of things that like, if you're getting experience working in groups and like for your coursework, hopefully you do well in these types of things. They just really are making sure that you're a type of person that they can see themselves working with. And for like, I probably have heard of this. If not, this is definitely something this like technique is something to look up. But the STAR technique and the STAR method is probably like one of the best ways to answer non-programming questions. Things maybe like what's on your CV or the competency-based questions, like the STAR method is kind of like perfect for these, like making sure that you're providing like succinct answers with all the information that kind of like really make you shine. And so the different steps to kind of walk yourself through is like explaining like the situation, the task, the activity, and the result, and really each response. So your situation is like setting the context of the story. So like what was the challenge or the background of the situation or problem? Task is about identifying what's kind of required of you. So like you want to like what was needed of you to overcome or make the project successful. Action is sharing what you actually did. So what actions did you take to resolve the problem? And then you want to like sort of result is about wrapping it up and telling them exactly like how well the situation was resolved. If you have any like clear success metrics, you should share those. Things that are immeasurable or concrete are really helpful at proving the fact that you have this trait that they're looking for. So I figured it might be all right to just sort of take you through an example of one that I did for IBM on adaptability. So we'll just go through this quick. So for me, the situation was, I said, like as a lab helper under the Surrey PAL scheme, I helped first-year students learn object-oriented programming in Java. So for many people, it was their first time looking at a piece of code, let alone writing any. So here I've sort of set up the scene. So I've sort of said what my role is, what I'm there to do, and sort of the abilities and the competencies of the people that I am trying to help. So for task, then you go into sort of what was required of me. So I said, in order to effectively assist students, I must be able to quickly understand their code and problem solve efficiently. Different teaching techniques were necessary to allow the students to grasp the code and implement it themselves based on their individual learning styles. And for some students, I was simply able to remind them of the syntax. For others, a more in-depth approach was necessary. And so by doing this, I've really clearly laid out what was necessary of me. So I am able to understand code quickly, I can problem solve efficiently, I can adapt my teaching styles, I'm able to help other people. I can identify how different people's needs, like how different people will reflect their different needs out to me. I'm able to really be able to like make sure that how I'm helping them suits them best. So then I go into the action. So I'm sort of specifying exactly what the situation is more now. So I'm saying, boy was struggling to understand how to use if statements to calculate the amount of tax return. So I sat down with him and drew out step by step the code with him. So this is why he needed to be able to learn to change his thinking into one of a computer. So this is where I've just basically said exactly what I did and kind of a bit of why. And then in my result, I'm kind of wrapping up what I've just done into kind of a way that kind of ties in nicely from my actions. So I said, by thinking through the steps and writing them out in mock code, the student was able to work through the control flow and implement the specific syntax on his own. This approach helped him learn whilst challenging him to grow and giving him that I did it moment. And so at least for this case, I didn't have like I didn't have like numerical examples or like of the result, but I was able to sort of explain what the positive result was and why this result was the ideal kind of result. And so it's basically, if you just sort of step through the star process, it's going to be much easier for your interviewer to really understand how your skills and experiences are fitting what they're looking for, whilst making sure you have a bit of a structure where if you get lost or are rambling, then it has something that you can fall back to and know, oh, next I really need to explain my action, or next I need to explain my result. So it doesn't need to necessarily step through everything in such a formulaic way, but making sure you hit those key points in a succinct way will make a difference. And so to kind of wrap up my interview tips, there's a couple things that you shouldn't forget. Is like, you are interviewing them too. So like, yes, you have gone in for an interview, but you don't want to forget that you should also be evaluating whether or not you want to join this team. So you should be asking yourself kind of like, what aspects of team fit are important to you? Kind of like, what do you want to get out of the team? What types of people do you work with best? And really like, how is this team going to help you advance towards your goals? So when I was like looking for my placements, I interviewed at Eli Lilly, which is a pharmaceutical company, and I got the job. But unsurprisingly, given they're a pharmaceutical company, they test on animals, and that wasn't really in line with my morals. And so I wouldn't have been happy or been passionate about the work that I did on that team. And so I basically took the chance of no placement and rejected my offer. The other thing is to remember that Microsoft hires for potential, and particularly at a junior level. And so they're looking to be able to teach you and kind of mold you to have the skills that they're looking for in Microsoft employees. You don't need to be an expert in their product before you join. Like, I certainly had no 3D experience when I joined Paint 3D. It's more about if you have like sort of the passion and enthusiasm to learn. And so it's like, you should remind yourself that it's also in the other team members' job specs to teach you. And so you should not feel bad about it. So it's like, they can't advance in their careers without helping you as well. So you shouldn't stop yourself applying from a role just because you don't think you fit 100% of the requirements. You should show that you are enthusiastic, willing to learn, want to strive for the best, and create impact for the company. And really on that note, it's kind of like, so you've gotten the job now, you've nailed your technical interviews, they've handed you your congratulations, Microsoft's offering you a job letter. now what's really the best way to hit the ground running and make the most out of your career? And so these are my early in career tips. First one, find a mentor. I've kind of mentioned this before about Lyndon, and so here my mentor Lyndon is talking about some of the work that she did on Xbox, and it was really like sort of her wisdom of the industry, insight into handling different situations, and really like pure insight into like experience, and like sort of that helped me excel during my placement and kind of fueled my fire to be like a women in STEM advocate. There are plenty of places that you can find a mentor. Often big employers will have internal schemes that you can sign up to, but alternatively, you can always seek out like third-party mentorship schemes. So for me, I also took part in the Students to STEMettes mentorship scheme. It's a young women in tech, like social enterprise in London, and they run this 6-month scheme. And so I signed up for that and was connected to a developer who works at one of England's large newspapers called The Guardian. And so I met with her at least once a month to sort of just have a chat and catch up and get some insight into the industry that was outside of my employer. But if those things aren't available or that doesn't interest you, you can always just go ask a colleague or someone in your circle to mentor you. It's really, if you think that they have something to teach you, you should just set up a coffee date and talk and really see where it goes. You have nothing to lose, but really everything to gain. That being said, my next tip is to seek communities outside of your day job. So for me, the women in tech community is my community. Some of the work I do is internal to Microsoft, such as with DigiGirlz, and some of it is external with like another organization called Code First Girls. These communities do really help fulfill your outside passions and interests and help you be a happier person. But really some of the best external communities kind of like combine multiple interests or skills. So the women in tech community really combines my engineering skills with my life experience and kind of my desire to help make the world like a better place. If you find a community that can like form a cross section with your career, then these additional communities can really kind of help you meet people that might otherwise been out of reach. So for instance, like in this photo here, you can see the woman that's like 2 people over from me in the middle is Cindy Rose, who is the CEO of Microsoft UK. And so for me, that is a great sort of network connection that I can at least say that if I want her to kind of know my name, we have this shared interest in supporting women in tech. And so really these external communities kind of unlock a network united by shared interests that can be tapped into to kind of accelerate your career and altruistic goals. And like I said, I've met so many incredible female leaders and have had countless career opportunities stem from this advocacy work, stem from these outside communities. So it's definitely worth looking into and seeing how they can support your career growth. Next is to lock into your USP or your sort of unique selling point. This is sort of probably one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given, is to really like find where there are gaps in your team's skills and fill them. Not only does it really sort of push you to learn new skills, but it also sort of makes you like an invaluable member of the team. So for me, that comes in the form of like Windows UI development done in XAML. So there are loads of like other amazing XAML developers on my team, but as their careers have progressed, they really have no longer as much time to kind of develop as much. And the other members of my team find it a bit too complicated or just aren't in their realm of interest. While conversely, I sort of enjoy the challenge of XAML and developing front-facing code, so it kind of appeals to my technology like sub-interests. So it was kind of like a perfect opportunity to seize a skill gap and fill it while sort of using like other XAML developers' experiences to kind of enhance and increase the pace of my learnings, and make sure that I'm doing things the right way the first time, as opposed to reinventing the wheel and trying to relearn things that I can learn from others. This does not mean that you should just limit yourself to this skill. Really, the intention is kind of to grow your skills into these needed areas. So like this expertise kind of like brings respect, it brings career growth opportunities. So you should be really looking to identify a cross section between the technologies that you love and the skills that your team needs. My last tip is don't be afraid to ask questions. I'd say starting on a new team as a new hire can be pretty intimidating. You obviously want to put your best foot forward, but you don't want to let that desire to seem smart kind of prevent you from being smart. There's going to be like a steep learning curve, and when you start a new job and no one is expecting you to be an expert. So the quickest way to really get up to speed and start making impact is by asking questions and learning. So the earlier stages of your career is all about learning and producing work sort of alongside these learnings. And so during my placement, I was pretty lucky, and I set up like bi-weekly technical chats with my manager. And these basically involved just getting me up to date with the advanced technical topics that were involved in Paint, 3D creation, things like that, as quickly as possible. I mean, it really paid off. I was really able to create big visible features that made me a valuable member of my team. When I went to Xbox, I was actually kind of told off a bit for not asking more questions because they thought I was being stuck, and I was just kept myself being blocked. I actually knew what I was doing, which made me laugh because of how well really my placement at Paint had prepared me. But the point was really that they don't want me to be blocked, and that it's better to ask help from the people who are there to help you than to make no progress or alternatively come up with a poor solution on your own. Asking questions make you smarter, so kind of go for it, ask, learn, and kind of get as much out of the team as you can. It really does pay off because we all started somewhere, right? We all started asking that first question. So if you want to kind of learn more about some of the lessons that I've learned, I cover some of the ones that I've just spoken about and some others in this Medium article I wrote. It's online, so feel free to check it out. As well as if you want to get in touch, that's my website, that's my Instagram page, and you can also just find me on LinkedIn. So I've kind of blitzed through that. That's me. I think we have some Q&A now.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Holly, for your presentation. A quick feedback from my side. So great to see that you were behind the Paint 3D and contributed into this project. I should say that I really like Paint 3D while I worked in education team. This app was part of my role to introduce it to the Hungarian public sector education, to the Hungarian public education sector and engage the teachers to use it with 3D printers. So it's so good to know that meet with you and know that you were behind this application. And my main part was that to selling your product. So it's nice to see that.
That's brilliant. I'm so glad that you enjoy it. It's been certainly fun to see where it's sort of been taken and all the different places that it's being used around the world. I'm certainly lucky that that was one of the first products I've ever worked on.
Yeah. So dig into the questions.
Yes.
I'm going to ask the questions what we have received through the question board, and also guys, if you have any question, let us know in the Q&A box and we will ask your question. So the first question is, how will artificial intelligence impact the work environment in our day-to-day life? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so this is quite an interesting question, and certainly one that quite a lot of people are debating at the moment, whether or not it's going to be good for society and good or bad for society. Personally, I take a bit more of an optimistic view. I think that where AI can go is more of enhancing our workflows that are existing already, as opposed to outright replacing us. So there are certain things that computers and AI are really good at. Sometimes they can be a bit more of like the menial tasks or the highly computational tasks. And so it's good to let computers do those kinds of things so that we can focus on sort of the more creative outlets, the ones that are about bigger strategy, about where we need to focus on communicating with people. So I think it'll actually end up making us more efficient, making us more effective, and increasing our productivity, as opposed to, at least for some people, being a negative thing. I've recently read a book called Hello World by Hannah Fry, and she sort of covers how sort of algorithms and AI has affected and are currently sort of impacting different industries, and seeing sort of like where they've been beneficial, where they still need work, how can we and how should we work with AI and algorithms. So if this is sort of like a topic of interest, this is definitely a book that I would recommend. It's a pretty easy read, so you don't really even need to know much about programming at all. I would say anyone can read this book and understand it, but it is quite engaging. And if this debate is of interest, I highly recommend Hello World by Hannah Fry.
Cool, thank you very much. So here's the next question from the Q&A window. Somebody is asking, I'm quoting, I was on the final interview stage and I failed. Unfortunately, I didn't receive any feedback, so I don't quite know what I did wrong. How could I find out what should I improve on?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. So usually whenever I did not pass an interview, which definitely happened, I would always try to get some feedback. You can just ask them, being like, is there something that I can improve on? But a lot of the times, if there's a lot of people, or there's like interviewing large candidates, especially at big companies, then they just don't really have the scope to respond. I would say though, sometimes it's not even necessarily personal. It might just be that someone else answered one question slightly better, or if they were looking for a slightly different skill set, or it could be anything sometimes, and it's not necessarily something that's reflecting on your technical skills. So it's a bit of a difficult one if they don't give you answers, but I do know some people that just keep going for interview after interview just for practice, even if they already are in a job that they love. So it was helpful to me that my Microsoft interview actually took quite a while, because I was able to use all of those other interviews for different companies as basically practice. So even if I didn't get it, at least I have learned to be more confident speaking, or learn to answer the questions that come up more often better, or learn what kinds of questions they ask. So really the best thing to improve upon is kind of just practicing. There are books and resources out there like Crack the Coding Interview, and different sort of like online, I think like Facebook even has like an online portal. I can try to find the link if someone's interested, where they sort of go through some kind of like, those the sort of like small to medium sized questions that they might ask you during a programming interview. So that might be a good resource to practice for those technical interviews.
Cool, thank you very much.
Any others?
Thank you. Okay. Next question is, who is your role model for women in our industry? Who could be motivating for the student partners who join the call?
Yeah, so I have quite a few role models. I would say a couple years ago, I didn't really know of many, but especially now that I'm joining more women in tech things, I'm meeting more people, and getting to know sort of the leaders in the industry. And so one of the I guess, two more high-profile women that are really inspirational to me is like one, her name is Dr. Emery. She started the STEMETS program. Again, is the one that I did that student to STEMETS mentorship scheme through. She's like a child prodigy, graduated from like Oxford at like, I don't know, 22 with her master's degree or something. She's crazy smart, and has gone on to create this really like sort of young women in tech organization that sort of posts hackathons and things like that. But it's really the fact that what she tries to push is that these industries are really creative and really suit girls. And so it's kind of all of her outreach work and how well she kind of presents herself and how well she, like how good of a speaker that she is and how that she keeps going into the public eye and really pushing. It's like, no, these are the real issues. These are how we're addressing them and how we can bring them forward. So she's a big inspiration and role model to me. And the other one, so she is the CEO and founder of Girls Who Code, and she's recently come out with a new book called Brave Not Perfect. And just kind of reading that, she's very honest and it's like you can really identify with what she is saying and kind of her mission and what she's trying to do. So again, Girls Who Code is a I think at least at the moment it's a national program in the US to again get like more girls into programming, give them classes and teach them these basic programming skills. But she kind of really tries to address sort of some of the internal struggles that women have with sort of like confidence and trying to overcome maybe some of these trainings that we've had as children that have kind of led us to get into these kind of difficult situations now. And so I guess if you're looking for role models, it's really should be people that are trying to inspire you, who are trying to push you or doing things that are what you kind of want to be doing, and kind of trying to take the lessons that that's making them successful and kind of applying them to what you can do. But I think just beyond having role models that you can kind of listen to and appreciate from a distance, having a mentor, someone who you can actually like speak to and be inspired to and be taught from, I think is a very, very valuable thing, particularly being early in career, because there's loads of things to learn right at the beginning. And having someone who sort of knows what they're doing and has the experience is incredibly helpful.
Very cool, thank you. Here's a cool question from the Q&A window. Do you have any tips for someone who would want to work at Microsoft as an intern, potentially advancing to an engineering position in the product team later on? What skills do you consider as the most important ones for them?
Yeah, so sometimes it really does come down to what the actual product team, like the technologies that they use. And so not all teams are going to be equal. Like I don't think I could get a job on SwiftKey who makes their keyboard because they do something totally different from the kinds of work that I do on Cortana. And so it's like if you're looking to get into a different field, it really helps to really understand exactly what kind of technologies that they use and like the full stack. So like what kind of languages do they use, what kind of frameworks do they use, do they use cloud, like all of these kinds of areas, and making sure that you know them well. Things like hackathons or competitions are really good ways of getting tangible projects, sort of either on your CV, on your GitHub, that can really prove that you know what you're talking about. And they're also good ways of getting like more visibility in the industry as well. One of the big things I always say is sort of opportunities compound. So if you do well at one event, it might lead you to be invited to something else, or you might connect with an industry leader that could help with something else. Like you should really put yourself out there. And so just basically being able to sort of prove that you have the skills and have experience doing them, I think that's going to make you successful, really, job experience and projects.
Okay, next question is from my side. In general, how does a working day look like at Microsoft as a software developer? And I'm asking that because there is a lot of stereotypes surrounding developers and IT guys. Let's say they are having pizza and cola all day long, they are afraid from sunlight and so on, and they are not really communicative guys. So let's break.
I probably work in one of like the coolest offices in Microsoft. So basically, one of my days sort of starts out, I get there around 9:30. At like 10:15, we have our first stand-up meeting with just like maybe like 12 of us. Our managers sort of call us over with like some music, so it's already like we're getting excited about our day. We go around in a circle and sort of talk about what we were working on the day before, what we're going to work on now, if we have any kind of blockers or things to kind of call out to other people. And we use like a Kanban board, so we have like note cards on the wall. And as we sort of move them through like the coming soon and in progress or in PR and completed and like done stages, we'll sort of like clap each other on, get each other excited, like you're doing great work. So we're a pretty fun team. From basically about 10:15 until 12 is all time for me to kind of just like work, whether that be programming or being in meetings or kind of like doing some more tech design stuff. At 12, we all go to lunch. Again, we sort of all sit together. I feel like sometimes we're back in high school, sitting around the lunch table together. We spend the next hour just like joking, laughing, telling stories. A lot of us play like pool or ping pong. You can play like video games. We have a couple Xboxes around, PlayStations, Wii's. And then, or you can play cards. So like I usually play cards with some people. And then we go back to basically from like 1 to like 5:30 usually is just sort of more work time. Sometimes we have like different brown bags where they're like kind of like technical chats to kind of like help spread some of the knowledge that the team holds across the rest of the team. Sometimes we do different events. Like this week we had Fix Hack Learn. So we were sort of put our normal jobs on hold for a week and just did some hackathoning. And that comes with good food, like free food, drinks, things like that. I would say it's becoming, at least like even with my experience on Xbox, I think the traditional sitting in a dark room programming thing is kind of over. I think programmers are actually really, really spoiled compared to a lot of other people now, where we have pretty fun offices, we get good food, working hours are really flexible. It's definitely a pretty fun industry to be in, especially like the teams in London, they're all good friends with each other, and it makes a huge difference to enjoying your job.
Okay, feedback upon here, it's pretty same for every Microsoft. Their mission to engage their employees to live a community life, and as well they not making boundaries around you, so you can play with the Xboxes in the working hours if you would like to, because if you like your working place, they sure about you will put every effort into your product, into your job. So that makes quite unique Microsoft than the others. So that's why everybody would like to work at Microsoft. From my point of view, because I really like to work at Microsoft. So last question from Mark.
Last question lastly. So What's your number one top tip for the MSPs joining this call, who wants to start in this field or just getting out of college? What's your number one tip? What you would like to give them?
Yeah, so if you are still like looking for a job, I'd really try to engage with the industry as much as possible. There's quite a lot out there and lots of opportunities to kind of be had. Once you start kind of making a name for yourself a bit, then you'll just have a million LinkedIn messages saying like, oh, you seem to fit the bill for this job. And so it kind of stops becoming maybe at least a challenge to get your foot in the door at other places. I think if you really do want to be successful, you should try to get as much kind of real programming experience at least as you can, whether that is doing your own projects at home or again doing hackathons or meeting up with like other teams and trying to like collaborate in some way, really proving that you again have the skills that's going to be able to get you the job. And once you're in that job, making sure you kind of take advantage of every opportunity that you have. Particularly for young people, there's loads of schemes out there that are specifically designed for us now, like under 25s, under 26s. And so there are some really like particularly like competitions that can lead to new, like even like jobs themselves, competitions that can lead to free conference tickets, trips abroad, things like that. And so these are the things that are going to make you end up standing out and being someone to know where employers are going to come after you instead.
Very cool. Thank you, Holly, for sharing your experience with the MSPs in the call. It was a pleasure to having you. See you next time, or I guess.
Yeah, thank you for having me, guys. It's been great speaking to you.
Definitely. Thank you, Holly. If you have any question, feel free to reach out to us later on. We are happy to answer your question. Let's be about job opportunities, about technical questions, and so on. We are happy to answer every question. Thank you, guys. Take care.
One last thing, if you guys do want to get in touch with me, do send me a message on any of like LinkedIn or my Instagram, something like that. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. I am personally a little bit curious. Would you mind sending just a message in like the chat of where you guys are all from? For me, at least, it's pretty cool that I've been able to speak to all of you today from all of you.
I can tell you now, actually, we have MSPs from Romania, Russia, from Hungary. And if I'm reading well, we have from Greece, Ukraine. And let me check. We have MSPs from Kazakhstan as well. And
So far, that's it. Curious now. That's great. Fantastic. It's been amazing speaking with all of you guys.
Yeah. So cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ollie. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend.
Okay.
Stay tuned with the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.